And the Democrats are over here just kind of playing Calvin ball, making up their own rules to their own game as they go along. How much of that with the latter do you think is just a function of they're communists and they don't have any respect for the rule of law? And how much do you think that they, in Minnesota, the Democrat Party doesn't know how to handle itself when they don't have complete and total control over every lever of power?
And, obviously both, but I just got to hand it to you on that second point. They just simply aren't used to this.
I talked to Dustin Grage this week. He's a conservative activist in Minnesota, an independent journalist. He's a great follow on X. You can find him at Grage Dustin on X. That's spelled Grage, Dustin, Grage Dustin on X. And it bloomed into kind of a broader conversation that touches a lot of the third rails of issues that we're talking about in this day and age. Election integrity, whether or not there's actually optimism in places like a purple state like Minnesota, well, what once was a purple state like Minnesota, and some other matters as well. We also talked about the character of the modern Democrat Party, and I think that is illustrated. Well, it's a horrible illustration, but it's illustrated well by Dustin and the story of what's actually happening with their state legislature this week. Here's the full unedited interview.
So I'll actually bring up 3 seats. A lot of people like to talk about the 2 seats, which in this case is Curtis Johnson, who was a resident of Little Canada, which is nearby the district he ran in, but it was not the district he actually ran in. In Minnesota, for our state legislative races, you actually have to reside in the district at least 51% of the time. So we actually out through the state trying to catch other people, Republican and Democrat, if they live in their districts or not. This is a fight on the side that's actually happening. But there's that one that's talked about a lot. There's also Brad Tabke in the Shakopee area, so South Minneapolis Metro. In that instance, we had actually won that race on election night. We ended up winning it by, I think, over 100 votes. Additionally, there was a St. Cloud race we had won by, I think, just roughly 25 votes, roughly.
Right.
I may have to double check on that, but go back, or go forward, spring forward an extra like 6-8 hours into the middle of the night. On the Secretary of State's website, these are 100% results confirmed, processed on the Secretary of State website. The screen glitches, and the lawyers at the MNGOP are watching it, and they flip. They flip completely 180, and the Republicans are now losing those 2 seats. We went from winning the legislature by 2 seats to now tying it immediately just off of those 2 glitches on the Secretary of State site. So we actually went through week-long processes on actually having these special counts, audits of those elections. And
Dustin, were there any glitches? Were there any glitches that impacted Democrats? That cost Democrats?
Exactly. It's maybe shocking to hear, but there was actually 0 discrepancies for Democrats. Yeah.
What a surprise! What a surprise! Continue.
What a surprise! How it always works that way. Yes. So, anyways, we kept having these fights with those 2 seats in particular. And people's eyes were just focused on these. Now, we had Curtis Johnson in the background already been working on, and Democrats really did not know this was happening. But we were actually observing this seat from a distance because local activists noticed that I don't see this guy around the actual community. What's the kind of up with this? Well, they look at the filing address, and they actually they visit, and they knock on the door. No one's there. They actually have this entire setup where they go and they figure out, oh, this guy has a house in Little Canada. They determine, oh, he's trying to sell the house to go live in this new district. Well, they find out that he actually never lives there. He doesn't have electricity that ever has been paid on the unit. He doesn't actually have Wi-Fi in the unit. He claims in court that he just goes there, he eats dinner and lays in his bed, and then he goes back out and campaigns the next day all day long in a district where Democrats win 75+% of the vote, by the way. So no, this isn't the case of he's out there campaigning hard. He just has to exist on the ballot. He's going to get reelected. Right. So they had a whole court case on this, ends up flipping him, disqualifying him from holding a seat. Well, now I'll just jump back over to the other 2 seats here. We ended up having these fights, but long story short, Democrats just plow plow the ground with everything, and we end up losing those recounts. Now come back to Curtis Johnson in that little Canada area. They end up finding him ineligible, and now this is key because now there are only 133 election certificates in the state of Minnesota, not 134 because one is ineligible. Now we end up going, and now there's only 67 votes needed to reach a quorum, and this is now where we're at this week on what's occurring now. We only need 67 votes. Well, the legislature was tied 67-67 on election, well, the day after election, after these glitches. But now we have enough people to have a Republican speaker. We've elected Republican speakers in the past. This has happened one time before, I believe in the 70s or 80s. I'd have to double check that exactly. But Democrats ended up actually removing one of our members because they had a felony of some sort with campaign finance. They ended up removing that member. Then it was 67-66 back at that time. Democrats elected then a Democrat Speaker of the House. So this has happened before under their own precedent. Now, coming back to Tabke in particular, this recount was different from the St. Cloud one. It wasn't just simply a glitch. They ended up losing that seat by 14 votes, only 14 votes. And they later find out after, I think, the second round of reviews that 20 ballots were completely discarded, and we don't know where they went. So we have a margin of victory for the Democrats that is smaller than the missing ballots.
Right.
So now there's this fight going on the side. Now, Democrats are doing this, basically this PR game of, oh, Republicans are trying to remove a duly elected member in order to elect a Republican speaker. Well, that's not true. We actually already have the numbers. We have 67 votes. They have 66 due to Curtis Johnson cheating and claiming he lived in a district that he never did live in. So we have it just off of that. But Democrats are using this PR game with our local media and going, hey, local media who's had our backs and has held our weight for so many years, as the nation now knows, all this to oppo with Tim Walz that was never covered because our local media never covered it.
Correct.
Now they're doing the same thing again. Now, it's a lot harder for them to get away with this than it used to be because now we have these platforms to actually call them out, and we're doing that as we speak, which is great. But they are using this kind of red herring and holding this out, saying Republicans are trying to remove this duly elected member. Well, no, the legislature just recognizes that if you have a margin of victory of 14 votes, but 20 ballots went completely missing, regardless of what that judge, which is a Democrat judge, by the way, we should have another election for that seat. It's just too close. The inconsistencies are ridiculous. And any logical human who's not a complete partisan hack can recognize that, you know, this is fair. This seat has gone Republican, Democrat, 4 or 5 times over the last decade and a half. We can have a re-election here. It was that close. The stakes are too high. Well, even if you remove that member, they would have 65, we would have 67, and we could go up to 68, and they could go down to 66. But no matter what, just with the Curtis Johnson case alone, we have 67, they have 66. So we can elect that member no matter what. But ultimately now, coming to this week, Democrats are just doing this media gameplay of, you know, just trying to distract our voters from this issue. Right. But at the end of the day, we have everything in our favor working for this. But if you even go just to session, they also have these other red herrings in here, such as, well, the Secretary of State comes and presides over the House. It's more of an honorary position. There's nothing actually in the Constitution that constitutes that they are a member of the body. It's like Kamala Harris coming in and going, yeah, I preside over the Senate. They're basically just a vote counter. Like, they don't actually have authority in these positions. The House Speaker, in that case, where they swear in, you can get sworn in by anyone in the U.S. House. But it's more of an honorary position. The same thing happens here. So once he gavels out, the members of the Republican House basically state, well, you are just here as a honorary member. You don't actually have any authority over us. We currently have a majority. We are 67 votes of 133 certificates. We're now going to go ahead and elect a Republican speaker. They go on and do so. And now this is just where we're at right now. There's this whole fight of legal battles that are going to go on for the next, basically probably the next month.
So it's not just, so it sounds like it's
this legitimate or not.
Yeah,
so,
it sounds like this fight is not just the one fight over that state representative who is not actually eligible to have a seat. There's multiple fights going on here. Dustin,
Yes.
tell me about what happened on Sunday. Was it at the Minnesota Historical Society?
Mm-hmm.
What happened there?
Yes, and thank you for reminding me that, Aaron, because this is extremely key. So Tim Walz actually released a statement saying that this whole House speaker fight was illegitimate, and because we're currently not in session. Those were his words in the statement. He was completely silent, though, when 66 Democrats showed up to the Minnesota Historical Society in the dead of night on Sunday night. After hours closed, they ended up paying with campaign dollars from their campaigns to rent the space on Sunday night, and insult to injury, they were also closed Monday and Tuesday. So media couldn't even reach out to the Historical Society to ask questions about the event. Media was not informed of this swearing in process. And in our state constitution, it states the second Tuesday of the first month is when session can commence. So 2 days before the second Tuesday of the first month, they decide we're just going to swear in our members with a rogue judge who's retired, not inform the media, and we're going to claim that this is legitimately in session, even though you can only be sworn in the session period. They're now claiming this is, well, now they have quorum, even if they don't show up. It's a part of this whole scheme to actually try to block Lisa Dameth, who's the new Republican elected speaker. So it's another layer. I wish it was just as simple as there's one or two things, but there's really just a dozen different things layered that people are just making things up along the way to try to block Lisa Dameth from being a Republican speaker.
Yeah. Okay. So what was this that I saw about swearing fealty to bail or something at that Sunday night illegitimate meeting? Was that just a troll?
Oh, that was absolutely just a troll. But, unfortunately, there's a lot of truth to it because
there were no cameras in there. I'm guessing there were no cameras in there. There was no live coverage. So we don't know that that's not true.
This is actually very accurate. And what I had also pointed out with this, so I mentioned how, they were closed Monday, Tuesday, and they chose Sunday night after hours. So no media members can contact them, which is egregious in its own right. It was very specifically chosen as a location for that reason. But even more beyond that, Aaron, if you go to the privacy policy of the Minnesota State Historical Society, in their privacy policy, it states this organization specifically is a nonprofit that is immune from the Minnesota Data Privacy Act. So I'll bring up an example where we actually ended up going to a liquor store in northern Minnesota, and we were able to, with that Minnesota Privacy Act, request to the store owner of the liquor store that, hey, there was an arrest of a state representative for a DUI in this area. This is the only liquor store around. Through this act, we would like to request that video and audio of the security footage. Well, they gave it over right away because of the act. And now we have video of Dan Wagamot of St. Cloud, which, by the way, is the candidate that was beaten on election night, one of those two races I mentioned. He was beaten. This glitch occurred, and then he won hours later after the glitch. So that representative, we were able to pull that video due to that reason, that act. Well, in this case, we can't even go in and request the security footage and assure that we can get it.
Because the Minnesota Historical Society is exempt from that law.
Yes, they're immune to this Data Privacy Act. So they can voluntarily give it, but it would take upward to 30 days. And if we are denied, which they don't have to give us a reason to be denied, we would have to then go through a court subpoena to get the security footage. So it's a very different game, and all very intentionally done for this purpose, to conceal what's actually happening with the House Democrat caucus. So it's another layer of it.
Good grief. What a mess. And we're short on time here. I don't want to abuse your time, but just from a big picture perspective here, it sounds like Republicans are doing everything above board. It sounds like they're organized. It sounds like on election night, they were ready and willing to have a fight, which I'm really encouraged to hear about the Minnesota Republican Party. And the Democrats are over here just kind of playing Calvin ball, making up their own rules to their own game as they go along. How much of that with the latter do you think is just a function of they're communists and they don't have any respect for the rule of law? And how much do you think that they, in Minnesota, the Democrat Party doesn't know how to handle itself when they don't have complete and total control over every lever of power?
And, obviously both, but I just got to hand it to you on that second point. They just simply aren't used to this. We saw it on the national stage, and
yes.
and just someone who's familiar with their comms programs and their actual field plans and how they go about their campaigns. They ran what they do usually here locally on the national scale. None of it was surprising. I actually predicted most of it before it was happening. I think I even, before anyone even called Tim Walz to be the VP candidate, I called it almost 2-3 weeks before he was the pick that he was going to be the pick, because we were able to go through their network and figure out, because it's a big state, but it's a small family. We're all kind of connected in some way or form, so it's easy to pick all this stuff out. Well, nothing's really changed, and in all honesty, it's just a small pond scenario where they are great in this state as long as nobody from the outside is seeing what's actually happening, and they're able to rely on a media that will cover for them at every single corner that they take. So I do think it is more the second point of they just aren't used to this. They are not used to this kind of a magnifying glass under their faces. And, it's just really exposing them. And it's been very reassuring as a Minnesota Republican who's looked at moving to Iowa over where you guys are, or Florida. Or we've seriously looked at that, but there's almost this glimmer of hope, maybe we can save this state finally because Tim Walz went national and now we're exposing everything.
Hey, you could sell us those 9 southern counties and you wouldn't technically have to leave Minnesota. You could stay in old Minnesota if you wanted to. Dustin, are you optimistic or pessimistic about the future of your state?
Say that again, sorry.
Are you optimistic or pessimistic about the future of your state?
I'm extremely optimistic, especially when you look at the U.S. Senate seat that's going to be up here with Tina Smith. That's going to be our most vulnerable one. And you look at some of the potential candidates that are going to be coming up, the pipeline here, there's a very real legitimate chance that Minnesota could actually completely flip the board on all constitutional seats, the U.S. Senate seat, and maintain our 50-50 split in the congressional delegation while winning the House and the Senate back. We're very well prepared. The map looks excellent for the Senate just to win, just purely off of the districting lines. The House, all we have to do is maintain it now, win one seat, which won't be that difficult, especially after the shenanigans they're pulling right now. And our Secretary of State, who's normally, advertised as a strikes and balls kind of guy, decided to completely disregard the state constitution recently, as of yesterday. So they're going to have an uphill battle. And truthfully, I think at our worst case scenario, we're going to win at least 1 or 2 constitutional seats. We almost won 2 last time. We came within 1.5 percentage points for 2 constitutional seats. So I just see us building on that and actually winning 2 of those, at least winning the Senate, maintaining the House, and potentially winning this U.S. Senate seat. So we've traditionally been pretty purple. Actually, we're one of the more purple states in the country. It's kind of hard to believe that because we just always lose our statewide seats, but we usually, keep a balanced legislature, and that's helped us in the past. But more recently, it's been trifecta control, and Tim Walz going to that national stage has really exposed that trifecta control and how crazy they've been, to the point we have had a House representative, a Democrat, by the way, in southern Minnesota, state in an interview that he hopes the House Republicans take back the state House this year, as in this last November. A Democrat made that statement before retiring. So they're absolutely insane, and people are starting to catch on to it because of this national attention. And, Aaron, just appreciate you actually digging into some of this stuff because we can kind of evangelize and spread the word about the corruption here in Minnesota. And, every single day we get a little bit further and actually obtain those goals of making the state a little bit redder. So, yeah, we have a lot of hope.
Well, I have a special place in my heart for the state of Minnesota, having been a resident there during college and then after leaving college for 5 years. And it's one of the most underrated and untapped potential states in our country, if not the most underrated state. Dustin Grage, he is a conservative activist, independent journalist in Minnesota. How can people follow you?
So it's Grage Dustin, Dustin on Twitter. You can also just go to dustingrage.com and find all my social channels there, but Dustin Grage. And also on Town Hall, I'm a columnist, so you can check out some of my work there. Going to be starting to jump back into that. And it's been great talking to you, Aaron.